What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Heroes for Sale podcast. My name is Adam. I am your host. So on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Prizm, the brand in general. So, like a few weeks ago, probably at the end of June, I put out a podcast talking about the new Panini blockchain Prizm cards. So, at least from what I saw, it looks like what they were doing was there's 100 players. Each player has 3 different one-of-ones. I like the idea. I mean, I know people probably will look at it and say they don't like it because there's a weird thing that's been going on in the hobby recently. Well, not even really just recently, but in general. It feels like sometimes people in the hobby enjoy finding things they don't like more than enjoying the things that they like. And I know I just said like a bunch of times, but I go on Twitter and I see people complaining like almost every day about whatever. Like people complaining about anything. Like there's just every single day there's a new thing that people are complaining about. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm doing what I'm saying people are doing by complaining about it, but it just seems like weird to me that like we have the internet and we have social media, these amazingly powerful tools, and basically all we do is complain on it. Like, we just complain about stuff. And the worst part is, like, I think the worst part, at least my opinion, is that, like, the stuff that people complain about is what ends up going and getting a lot of likes and becomes, like, somehow people complaining is what I'll see on my timeline because someone that I follow liked it. I like and I dislike that feature of Twitter because it helps my tweets when people like my tweets, but then it doesn't help me or I don't like it when there's stuff that there's things I purposely don't follow. If I don't follow something, it's because most of the time it's because I don't want to follow that thing or the person or the entity or the concept or the idea. And if someone likes it and it comes on my timeline, it's like I didn't want to see this. Like, if I wanted to see something like this, I would have followed it. So, whatever. Either way. So, the Prizm cards. I like the Prizm cards. So, the first Zion Prizm, the one-of-one, another logo man, they added the one-of-one gold Prizm logo man autograph, too, which is pretty sweet. It's sold for just over $42,000. So, the Zion card started at $250. And the other one started at 100. So I do wonder if, since this one didn't sell above 100, if they just put it at 100 like the rest of the cards, because this one-of-one has the logo man in it. So I would figure this one will probably be the most expensive out of all of the 3 Zions, just because the other 2 are just one. I think one's like a Nike patch and then one's like a Pelicans patch or something like that. So I would imagine that this one is going to sell for the most out of the 3 because it's the logo man, right? So this kind of gets me down the road, and I talked about this, I think, on yesterday's podcast, where I talked about the Prizm brand in general and some things that I think they can do to strengthen this brand. And it also kind of gets to a point, like, I think there's an interesting comparison between that and what Topps is doing with, like, their Chrome Allen and Ginter and Chrome Stadium Club. They're not really putting out a new product. They're repackaging a product that's popular. So I feel like if there are similar minds in the hobby and similar minds in the marketing and production side of the hobby world, that looking at what Topps is doing sort of in reverse of what this concept is, where Prizm, if they were to come out with a paper version of Prizm, I talked about this yesterday, with like how they have Donruss and Optic, where the Donruss is basically the paper, so it's Donruss Optic, whatever, but it's, maybe they come out with a different name similar to like Optic and Donruss, where it's like Prizm is the Donruss, and then they come out with like some sort of like, I don't know what they would call it, but like Prizm something, where instead of it being like Donruss Optic, it's Prizm something. So, like, it has the brand, but it could be a standalone product, and it doesn't necessarily... It would have the Prizm branding, but it doesn't necessarily have to be called, like, Prizm paper or something like that. And it's the same where, like, you look at Bowman, and I think that's a very popular... That's probably the most popular product within the baseball cards. So, like, why couldn't... And I wouldn't necessarily want them to combine Prizm and then this new Prizm product, because I don't know. Actually, maybe that would be one way to do it. Is to... No, because then they would kind of have to change what is already there. So I think in my opinion, looking at Prizm now, it's become like a much harder brand to buy for new collectors because of the pricing of it. Because somebody coming in my opinion, Prizm is the go-to brand, but someone coming in is going to look at like if they want to buy like a Tatum or like a Luka or a Zion, they're like, and they want a PSA 10 or even on a PSA 10, if they just want like a raw card, they're spending like almost $100 for any of those players for one of their raw cards, where, like, sure, the paper Prizm product that I'm talking about, this new concept, obviously is not going to hold as much value as the regular Prizm, but I think it would give collectors another option where they can still collect Prizm, but they don't have to spend $100 on the card. They could spend, like, granted, I don't know exactly what the pricing would be. Like, if I had to guess, it would, like, if the Lukas are $150 right now, a paper Luka would probably be like maybe $50, I would say. But so for other players, I don't know. You know, I think it, or I would think it would be cool. No, I guess I wouldn't really want that if they combined all, like, if they made like a, no, this would be a cool product if they did this. If they did like a one-time Prizm, like top players of Prizm or something like that, where they took like 3 or 4 of each of the top players and they put that into one set. Like, if 2022, if they did like, that actually would be perfect. If they did like a 10 years of Prizm and they took the top players, granted, they would have to figure out, they would put another logo on there, and they would have to make sure that these cards, they couldn't be mistaken for the real Prizm card. But I think that would be kind of cool in a couple years, like as a 10-year anniversary product. But this Prizm paper product would help newer collectors be able to collect Prizm without having to spend as much money as it costs. And I do wonder if it would be a concept that would it water down the Prizm market any more than it already has. And I guess, I mean, I would say no, because realistically, I think this year and last year they continue to increase the print runs on Prizm, but the pricing has not necessarily gone down. It's basically just, it keeps going up. So I don't think the fact that there would be another Prizm product, or there'd be another idea along these lines, I don't think it would affect the pricing of Prizm. And I think if it did, that would then make, I still think a percentage-wise, and I think about this when I'm doing research and kind of all that stuff, is percentage-wise, I do still think that the cards themselves will go up, maybe not at the total price. Like I don't think, like, if they, let's say next year they come out with like, I don't know, LaMelo Ball, Prizm, and then a Prizm paper product, and let's say a long-term LaMelo Ball goes on and he becomes like a top whatever player, I would say if they came out with these two products, I would still think that the LaMelo Ball, both products would go up. I think if a player is good, their products are most likely going to go up in price. And it may not go from, if they only came out with one Prizm, it may not go from, let's say, it may not go from $300 to $3,000, but I think it would still go from like 300 to maybe 1,000, which, like, at the point where you are spending $1,000 on a card, like a Prizm rookie card, like, I do also wonder if once you get to that level of spending that money, if there's a better card you could buy than Prizm. Like, at that point, is it worth, if you're spending $1,000 on the card, is it maybe worth just spending $1,500, and then maybe there's a card that's proportionally better, and you're not spending as much, like, because one thing that I continue to think, and even though it's been clear and it has shown throughout this year that the number of cards it's not going to necessarily matter for the price of the card. Like, I think a lower population card will outperform a higher population card, but the higher population card will not be affected by it having a high population, if that makes sense. So I do wonder, and I keep wondering that. I keep wondering if at one point there is going to be a ceiling on like a card like a Luka card because of how many there are. Like, because of how many PSA 10s there are, is there maybe a lower ceiling than if you were to find a little bit more expensive card? Like, for Luka now, I think they're in the 800 range. Like, if you're going to spend $800 on that Luka card, is there a card that you could then spend $1,200 on, and that card is actually going to be much more valuable in the future than the Prizm card? So, I mean, I guess maybe that's something that I could do a little bit of research on, and it's kind of a concept that I just thought of as I was kind of recording. So, to answer that question, I'm not sure because I just thought of that. But I do think my gut is telling me that there is probably a product, and I guess it would be, because Prizm, in my opinion, is like the top base product for rookie cards. But I wonder if you're spending that money on like an RPA, like even a lower level RPA, are there lower level Luka RPAs that are in the $1,200 range? Where, I mean, I don't know. That's sort of the thing that I need to do a little bit more research on. Like, and at what point does one of these players should you just start looking into that rather than looking into their Prizm rookie card? Or is it always like, for base cards, it's always going to be Prizm, but I'm just wondering, like, if you want to take that step up and you want to buy an RPA over a Prizm rookie card, or just any base rookie card, at what point does it become more valuable? And I know they're like the silvers and like numbered cards, like those are examples of you're going to be spending a little bit more and maybe you're getting more of a rare card. And it honestly even could just be that concept. It could just be buying like a silver or a numbered card, and that's what you should be going with eventually when it gets to a point, like, because I don't know. I mean, but the only problem then that gets into the conversation, like, is a silver better than like a red Prizm that's numbered? And I think the red Prizm is going to be better if you're buying it for the same price. The red Prizm is definitely going to be better. So, I mean, these are, I guess, I now that I've kind of talked these concepts out a little bit, I think I do want to do a little bit more research and look into these types of things, because I think I'm just wondering, at what point does Prizm become way too high end for a base product? That's the one thing. It's like it's not National Treasures. It's not impeccable or flawless. It's not like a product that really has, like, I don't know. I'm not sure the kind of the point that I was getting at there, but it shouldn't be a high end product because it's just a base product. But because of the prices, it's become higher end. That's kind of what I've been thinking about for the past few months or so, as these Prizm cards have gone up. That's all I've got for today's episode. I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, StarStock. Go follow them at StarStock Market on Twitter and Instagram. Go follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all the places where you can find content, essentially. And if you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be phenomenal as well. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.